let's do leasing and property management. This is on page 58. And you've got 3 test questions here. Now, I want to drive this home for you again because I get this feedback about the exam a lot. Amy, there were way more than 3 leasing questions on the exam. You lied to me. No, they don't say lie. But here's what I'm going to bet happens. You had a question that had the word lease in it, and that's it. Just keep in mind when it comes to leases, purchase agreements, we still have maybe agency created in order to draft those documents for a client. So it could be an agency question. More than likely, though, it's going to actually be a contract question. Now, when we talked about contracts, don't forget a contract is a buyer agency agreement, a seller agency agreement, a listing agreement with a seller, a lease, a purchase agreement to buy. Those are all types of leases. So what we're going to focus on in this little section is the length of the lease and how it's paid. I think is going to be where you live on the exam for questions. And then you might have a question about the role or responsibility of a property manager somewhere in there as well. Let's on 58, there in the middle, under leasing basics. This is the term or the length of the lease is what we're talking about with these definitions. So an estate for years, the length of that lease has a hard start date and a hard end date. There is no need to give notice to the landlord because when the lease is up, it's up. And that lease could be for days, a week, month, years, could be for any length of time. But the point is, it's hard start and hard end date. You don't need to give a notice to the landlord. An estate from period to period has a start date and an end date, but you must give a notice to the landlord in order for it to terminate. So a lot of you, when you've rented a house or apartment, you've maybe done a 1-year lease, but you've been required to give a 30 or 60-day notice in order for that lease to end, which means if you had a lease January 1st through December 31st, if you had a 30-day notice you're required to give and you didn't give that on December 1st, surprise, you're now paying January 1 rent. And that's okay if that's what works. And that's what you need. You needed that 13th, 14th, 15th month. You can, but then when you go month to month, your payment could go up too. You're not necessarily locked in on that rent anymore. But the point of an estate period to period or month to month is you've got to give a notice to the landlord. An estate at will is an indefinite period, and it goes until either the landlord or the tenant gives notice. So it doesn't have an end date. The end date only occurs when landlord or tenant gives a notice. It could go on for days, weeks, months, years, and years. But it's when one party gives the other notice. And then an estate at sufferance is just what it sounds like. The length of the lease is up for whatever reason, and the tenants won't get out. And maybe they did give notice. Sometimes we've got tenants that give notice, and then they put drop cords to the neighbor's house and move back in, and they squat. It's insufferable. Now, the other thing that I think you could have one, maybe 2 questions on is on page 59, where it has the gross lease, net lease, percentage lease. This is how the lease is paid. With a gross lease, you pay your rent and utilities, but the landlord pays taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Most of you, if you've ever rented an apartment, for example, have done an estate from period to period, has been the length of it, and the way it's been paid has been a gross lease. You've combined those two things together. So a gross lease, you pay your rent, some utilities, landlord pays everything else. A net lease is when the tenant pays everything. They pay rent, they pay property taxes, they pay insurance, they pay maintenance, which means they get all the tax benefits for those things as well. One thing I would add to your notes that it could pop up on the exam like this, and by the way, this is the language that our commercial lease agents use. This is the in the biz language, is they call that a triple net lease. And I think you could maybe see that as the term. I would add that to your notes, is a triple net lease. That means the tenant is paying taxes, insurance, and maintenance in addition to their rent. That's a net lease. Then I think you could maybe also have just a standalone question wanting you to know the definition of a percentage lease. A percentage lease is when someone pays their rent based on their sales. They pay a percentage of their sales as rent. Now, someone asked, and yes, you can use this in combination with a gross or net lease. You could have a base plus a percentage. But I know several people that have shared with me that they pay just a straight percentage lease. This works really good in retail because then you're paying according to your sales, right? So in December, when you maybe have holiday gift shopping and higher income, your rent is always in proportion to what you sell. I did a percentage lease for a website that I used to have for the school, and I paid a percentage of my sales, and it worked. When it worked great. Because I was always paying something. If I had a lower month, I wasn't paying this high rent bill. It worked out really nice until I realized how much I was going to pay as a yearly. As sales grew, so did that percentage. So I decided to go a different route. Then another thing that could come out of here is just the role of a property manager. And a couple things I want to put there is number one, if you're going to be managing property for a third party, a landlord or a property owner, you are required to have a real estate license in Iowa. So if Lynette comes to me and says, I've got 8 investment properties, I don't want these phone calls when someone's toilet breaks. Will you manage these for me and help me find tenants and et cetera, et cetera? That would be the role of a property manager, and I need to have a license to do that. So that's number one. But number two, what is the role of a property manager? And it is different than what we've been talking about with sales and real estate. A property manager is not going to necessarily just deal with the tenant's lease and putting that together and marketing to find renters for those units. It could also be that they manage the property. When something breaks, they help that property owner get it fixed. They line up people to mow and snow. And in some cases, the property manager even takes care of finances. They're paying some of those bills, they're doing a cash flow report. They're maybe sometimes managing multiple accounts on behalf of their property owner. Now, whatever the property manager does for their landlord, All of that's got to be in writing. It's got to be really clear what their roles and responsibilities are. But it's more than just doing the lease. A lot of property managers just do more than the lease. I've shared with you guys, I've got a property manager out of state. He finds the tenants, he markets it for me, he puts the lease together, he qualifies them before we even get to the lease, and takes care of the application process. If something breaks, they contact him, not me. We've got a red light, green light on how much money he can spend on a repair before he needs my permission. And then at the end of the month, all the rent that he collects on my behalf, he reimburses himself any bills that he paid for repairs. He pays himself a management fee, and then what's left over, he pays me out and sends me a direct deposit. And he gives me that report of what money he brought in and what money is going out with my balance every single month. And I'm going to call that a cash flow report. Okay, let's talk transfer of title. You've got 6 test questions for this. And this is all about title. And just like a car or anything else own, you've got a title that proves you are the owner. Well, in real estate, the document that we use to prove you're the owner is a deed, DEED. And there's several types of deeds, and there's several elements that qualifies it to be a valid deed. Now on page 63 and 64, I've got a list of things that make up a valid deed, but I've had you focus on 3 of these. Number 1, we need a grantor that is of sound mind and legal age. And once again, if a minor signs something, it's voidable. Voidable. Grantor is the sellor, or transferor is how I remember that. At the top of page 64, we talked about notaries. And a notary, this is when someone has authority to validate someone's signature, that's the person that's actually signing. They're in your presence. With that notary signature, that is what a deed needs. It's got to be notarized. Not the purchase agreement, not a lease, not a listing agreement, not an agency agreement. It's the deed that needs notarized. That's great for you to know that detail on the exam. And then delivery and acceptance. When does title transfer from a seller to a buyer? Well, it's when the deed is delivered and accepted, not when it's signed, not when it's dated, but it's when it's been delivered and accepted by the buyer, which we've been talking is just going to happen at closing. Belinda, did you have another question or just an itch? Okay. Okay, perfect. Types of deeds. Bottom half of page 64. Now, I've got several for you here. Some that you'll use for when somebody buys something at a sheriff's sale, something when it'll be used for an estate when someone passes away. I've got a list of them for you here, but there's 3 that are common for your career and that are most likely to hit for you if, for example, you had an exam coming up, which you do. The first one is a general warranty deed. This is the best. I want you to think 5-star general in the military. They're the best. And with that, the reason it is the best is because it warrants or protects against title defects, such as liens that would have been from the past, from the present, and the future. So when I sell a property here in Iowa, and I'm going to be doing a general warranty deed, in that deed, I'm basically signing saying, I'm going to clean up title issues. I've cleaned up all the title issues, past and present, and I haven't done anything that would create a lien for this property in the future, such as having a contractor do work that I didn't pay them. Right? It's a guarantee that we've got everything cleaned past, present, future. It's the best. Special warranty deed is a deed where it protects the past and the present, but not the future. This is the type of deed that we use for a foreclosure, or what we've been learning is also called an REO property, real estate owned. And you might be wondering, well, what happens in the future if there were a lien put on the property that a past owner created? Well, that's where we use title insurance. That's on page 67. But that's where we use title insurance. Title insurance is paid for by the buyer, but it protects them if they've got a title issue that comes up in the future. They can call on that insurance policy. Top of page 65 is a quit claim deed. Quit, not quick, quit. This has no guarantee at all whatsoever. And I think that could very well be a question. Which of the following offers the least amount of protection as a deed? The answer is going to be a quit claim deed. Do I dare say it's crap? Oops, I just did. I'm saying it to you like that to help you hopefully remember it by saying something dramatic. This is literally being used as a way to clean up title and getting people on and off in a divorce, for example. You're keeping the house. You're going to get, when the divorce is final, you're going to take that ex-spouse as a quit claim deed and remove them from title. That's usually what that's used for. There's other times, of course, but that's a common one. But it's got no warranty at all whatsoever. Good luck. Title records, page 66. One thing that we do is we record all of these deeds and all of these encumbrances, such as easements, deed restrictions, liens. We record those on public record so the world knows what, number one, that you own the property, but number two, is there anyone or anything else that has interest in your property, such as a lien, even though it doesn't rise to actual ownership? That's why we record on public record with your county. The question now becomes, when these liens are recorded on public record, who's the priority? Meaning, who's the one that needs to get paid first when you sell your property or when the property is transferred for whatever reason? And the rule is first in, first out. I had somebody that actually worked at the recorder's office in class about a year ago. They used the term FIFO, first in, first out. There's a little in the biz knowledge for you. I was pretty excited about that. What that means is first come, first serve. So if I buy a property, I get a mortgage on it, they're going to file the deed with my name on it with public record, how I hold it as a joint tenant or in severalty. All of that's going to be on that title work. And then immediately, if I got a loan to buy this house with Wells Fargo is going to put a lien on the property on public record so the world knows I don't own that house clean and fair, right? I owe them a debt, which means if I sell it or I default on the loan or it's going to go to a sheriff's sale because of back taxes, they are the first property that's recorded as a lien. That's where we're talking about priority. Now, here's the rule. First come, first serve, unless what? Property taxes or special assessments, those always jump to the front, no matter if they're recorded or when they're recorded. we make sure that our county is paid first. Those always jump to the front. Great test question. Then, when we transfer property, there will be an attorney that does a title search that goes through and does all of this public research about encumbrances and anything else. And remember, they're not just looking at encumbrances, they're looking at general non encumbrance liens as well, like child support. They're going to do any public record research to see anything that would affect the title to a property. They're going to write it up in a report. This is called a title opinion. They're going to look for a clear chain of title, no gaps in ownership. And then in Iowa, at the very bottom, we use these abstracts. And every time the property is bought and sold, we update this with everything included with any of those encumbrances, any non-encumbrance liens. So that means deed restrictions, easements, title owners, how they took title, if they got a mortgage. It's all kept in this autobiography that we call an abstract. And in Iowa, we are, I believe Oklahoma still uses abstracts, but they're not updated every time it's bought and sold. I don't know what they do with theirs, to be really honest. But in Iowa, we still are kicking it old school. And I know that seems antiquated, but I hope it never goes away. Because most states can't offer general warranty deeds. Because once something's gone from public record, like a lien, it's gone forever. Where our abstracts have that in the history books, right? So most states, the best type of deed they can do is a special warranty. That's why they require you to buy title insurance. In Iowa, because we're able to do general warranty deeds, we don't really have the need for title insurance. And in Iowa, our title insurance is provided by Iowa Title Guarantee. It's a sister relationship to Iowa Finance Authority. And we do title insurance policies, I think, for $175. Very inexpensive. You guys, once you get licensed in Iowa, will like to know the term Iowa Finance Authority, IFA. Like I said, they provide some relationship to this title insurance we do in Iowa. But IFA, by the way, they've got grant money for buyers and sellers. There's, I believe, a first-time homebuyer grant for around $3,000. I believe there's a military grant to purchase real estate for $5,000. This is, we fund this in Iowa. It's part of what is in our budget to fund. And there's, millions of dollars on it. I mentioned that brokers have escrow accounts and the interest goes to the state. That money is contributed towards IFA. So there's some good buyer perks out there with Iowa Finance Authority. I had a buyer recently that bought a townhome, and by the time we used that IFA grant and then we had negotiated the seller would pay her loan costs, her closing costs, and then we were going to get a tax credit from the seller to the buyer for accrued taxes. She brought less than $200 to the closing table to buy that property. Worked out really well for her. So there's grant money out there. There's other grant programs with your counties as well. Side note. Let's actually now fast forward to page 69, and this is escrow accounts. I want you to think of an escrow account as other people's property. You down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. I don't really know what that stands for, but we're going to use it in real estate as other people's property. Any money, such as deposits, earnest money to buy real estate, or any money that a buyer is bringing to closing to settle a transaction and pay the seller. That's other people's property, it's other people's money. That goes into an escrow account. It should never be commingled with the general funding or general business account of a brokerage or a bank or a title company or an attorney. So I want you to know that term commingling, illegal. Another word they might use with commingling is conversion. Again, illegal. Another question is who can have an escrow account? That could be an attorney, it could be a real estate broker, it could be a bank, or it could be a title company. Okay. And then prorating on page 70. We're going to talk about that with math. But I just wanted to put it in here that when we're settling fees between buyers and sellers, there's accrued fees and there's prepaid. Accrued means it's a buyer credit and a seller debt. The seller owes the buyer money, for example, with taxes for the time they own the property, but maybe the tax bill isn't due until the end of the year. Prepaid means the buyer owes the seller money. So it's a buyer debt and a seller credit. And I'm going to go through with you how to do the math. And so we'll talk about these terms again here in a little bit. And then just as a reminder, the loan estimate and closing disclosure form. Loan estimate form, we talked about this in financing. They've got 3 days to review that in the front, and the closing disclosure at the end, they've got 3 days to review that before closing. So 3 and 3. Last but not least is our section on practice of real estate. This is 10 test questions. This is the top 3 section of that I'm going to have you study out of this book. Contracts, is number 1 with 15 test questions. Agency is number 2 with 10. This one's number 3 with 10 test questions. And I'm going to bet of the 10, 5 or 6 are going to be on fair housing alone. But I do think you could have 2 to 4, depending on the exam, about antitrust laws on page 74. These are federal laws that are put in place to promote the free flow of goods and services and to prevent against monopolies. I would know the definition. That could be a great test question. There are 4 basic types of antitrust laws: price fixing, group boycott, allocation of customers and markets, and tying agreements or tie-in agreements. Price fixing happens when 2 or more brokers get together and they discuss their fees. You're in that meeting, you got to get up and leave. And I had to say this to another broker last night at dinner. She said, well, let me tell you a story about a recent deal I did. I was charging the seller and she said the number. I said, don't say the number. She goes, well, it's what I charged in the past. I said, don't say any numbers. Don't say it is cookies. Don't say the number of cookies you charged. No, it's still an implication. Just say, I charged X. That's it. We don't say number, or I've got to leave and I'm going to leave you with the bill. So don't do it. We got to be better. And guys, I slip all the I mean, I slip and sometimes say number two with something. I mean, I'm human, but don't get into those conversations. If you're going to talk about commissions, talk about it with your broker. Yeah. Um Christie's auction house and Sotheby's had a probably about a $650 million or so lawsuit on this several years ago, probably in the 90s. Sotheby's and Christie's is like the auction house where you would take like your 20 karat yellow canary diamond, or the bat that Babe Ruth used for his final home run hit, or something really unique. Your Picasso art painting. They were accused of price fixing their fees for their auction services, is my understanding. And again, we can't do that. The consumer's got to have the availability to go and shop for value. Like, you charge this, but you give all of this value of services with it. You charge this and you give these services or value, right? The consumer gets to decide what's best for them. Group boycott. This is when two or more businesses conspire to run a third out of business by withholding. So let's say you and I get hacked at a home inspector because he sold his house for sale by owner. How dare he not hire an agent? We're going to get him back. We're not going to send him any of our buyer leads that need to do a home inspection. We'll teach him. No, we won't. That's group boycott. That's illegal. By the way, I've had that inspector before. And I've had to stop agents from, you know, lighting torches on fire and marching to his place of business, is what it felt like. But here's what it looked like. Somebody needs to call this guy and have a conversation. And just say, I hear you sold for sale by owner. As somebody that, offers this service, we do business together. I give you this option when I'm working with my buyers. Help me understand why I didn't get hired. And I bet they would have said, I didn't want to have to pick. Well, I know a lot of good agents. I didn't want to have to pick one and have the rest of you be mad. Guys, I've just learned over the years, I've had clients call and say, uh, we're listing our house and we're hiring Michelle so-and-so. We hope you're not mad. And I've just learned over the years that, yeah, I'm disappointed. But at the end of the day, I care that people hire a licensed professional, whether it's me or whoever the hell Alice hired. Whoever it is, you got better protection having someone involved. Sorry, Alice, I had to go there. You got better protection of having someone involved than no one. I'd rather have someone advocate for you than you advocate for yourself and potentially cost yourself even more money or do more harm than good. I've just learned that that's my attitude. Side note, I think your other option is doing a tie-in agreement, and we will talk about this with the Iowa Code. So I do think you could have a tying or tie-in question on the exam for the state section as well. A tie-in agreement happens when we tie two contracts together. Let's say I've got a lot for sale that I've got listed, and a builder comes and wants to buy that lot to build a house on. And I say, I will only sell you this lot if you give me that new construction listing. That's a tie-in agreement and it's illegal. Now, can I sell him the lot and then list the new construction home? Absolutely, and I do a great job. The point is, we cannot make one a condition of the other. I always think of this like when you go to Famous Footwear and they're offering you a BOGO, buy one, get one half off. Did you know that you're not required to buy two pairs of shoes? That you can go in and just buy one? Ladies, am I blowing your minds? That you can just go in and buy one? They're just saying that if you buy a second of equal or lesser value, we'll give it to you half off. But they're not requiring you to buy two. So that's legal. That would be legal to do. It's okay for you to say, if you list with me, I'll give you this package deal for my services, but you can't refuse them on the condition of tying them together. The other example I gave you is a property manager that says, if you list this property, you've got to list it with me. No, you're tying two contracts together. But what that property manager can do, and we did have a property manager do this, and I thought it was an excellent idea, is they can say, if you do sell this, if you list it with us, we'll give you this price package of bonus to get the house in maintenance so it looks sharp when we list it. We'll offer you a package. That, yes, but forcing, no, it's got to be two separate decisions. Fair housing, you've got a lot of options. And the number one thing you've got to know is the list, and you've got to stick to the list. On the national exam, stick to the list. The list is race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, and disability. This is on your page 75. Race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, disability. Stick to the list. Marriage is not on the list. Your political party is not on the list. Veteran status, not on this list. Stick to the list. Sexual orientation is not on this list. Now, sexual orientation does have other protection from federal law, but it's not under fair housing. For religion, what I want you to know about this one is private organizations or religious groups can have housing that they offer to just their members. However, if they advertise this property commercially or publicly, now they would be subject to any applicable fair housing laws. Family status. We cannot advertise as adults only. We cannot restrict the number of children by creating occupancy limits. And we cannot create an environment where, for example, families with children can only live on the first floor. A family can be as little as one person. It can also include a pregnant woman or anyone under the process of adoption or the process of taking in foster care children. But there is housing for older persons that allows those 55 and older communities, those deed restricted by age communities. But I think we've got several things to know under disability. Disability includes someone with AIDS, and it includes someone in a current addiction recovery program. It doesn't cover them with their felonies, but it does cover someone in a current recovery program. The top of page 76 is the landlord is required to allow someone with a disability to make reasonable accommodations to the property. It can be at the tenant's expense, and we can require them to bring it back to its original condition, minus basic wear and tear. Then bottom of page 76 is blockbusting, steering, and redlining, Redlining. These three travel, in my opinion, on the exam really well as like ABC options. Blockbusting is what we do to sellers, steering is what we do to buyers. Blockbusting is where we break up the block by telling sellers that they want to move because a certain protected class is moving into the neighborhood and it's going to make their values drop. That's not your marketing plan. Steering is when we indicate a buyer should live in a certain area where they would feel more comfortable. No. The only reason that we should be turning down a buyer is for financing. Like we either don't know if they can afford it yet or we know for a fact they can afford it. Financially, you can say to someone, you can't, this is outside of your price point, what you're pre approved for. I'm not going to show you a $500,000 house when I know that you got a pre approval letter that's only up to 250. That would be a reason to say no. But that's really all you got. And then for your career, for discriminatory purposes, make sure you've got a plan in place. If your standard is that you don't send a buyer properties or show them property until they've got a pre approval letter, if that's your standard, then that's your standard with every single buyer that you work with. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think there was a really good, well, not good in the fact that we found a lot of agents discriminating, but good in terms of learning about real estate. Newsday did an undercover report in the New York area several years ago that they sent buyers in undercover with the exact same story, exact same pre approval letter, exact same profile, but they were different ethnicities. And they wanted to see how the same agent responded to each of those buyers. And what was the real learning matter is a white buyer was getting sent properties, no questions asked, but someone of a different race or skin color was required to bring in a pre approval letter before they would get sent properties or shown properties. And they would use phrases in the conversation like, well, I want to tell you this, even though I can't really tell you this. That's a way of basically saying, I'm going to steer you out of this neighborhood for whatever reason, but I'm not going to steer someone else out of it. That's a problem. That's an absolute problem. Whatever you do with your buyers, have a cadence to it. If you don't show property unless they're pre-approved, then that's the rule with everyone. You do closing gifts with a buyer, then you do a closing gift with all your buyers. All of my brokerages have even had a rule that when someone comes in to our office, comes through our entrance, we either offer coffee and water to everybody or no one. Because the moment we offer it to Megan, but not someone else, now does that look discriminatory? So just have really good systems would be my advice for your career. You'll do great. Redlining, I absolutely think will be on the exam, but I do think that it will be qualified really as a lending. That's really where it deserves to be. But because I see these three run together, that's why I've got them where I've got them. Redlining occurs when banks, this is illegal now, but especially with FHA loans back in the day, used to have redlining maps, and they would only award loans to minorities in these redlined areas. They would not do it in something a neighborhood that they felt was a higher end safe area. It was maybe labeled a green or blue area because they felt by doing an FHA loan to a minority would cause the rest of the value of the properties in that neighborhood then to go down. So they would only give loans in certain sections to minorities. Really illegal. And again, I mentioned watch the movie The Banker on Apple TV. Excellent, excellent movie that really displays what was happening. Did you watch it this weekend? Yeah, good movie, isn't it? It has Samuel L. Jackson in it and Anthony Mackie. I mean, you're not going to go wrong there. And who's the wife of Anthony Mackie? She's really famous too, but I can't ever think of her name. It's a good one. Then I would know exemptions. And we've already talked about one, that the religious group or private organization can offer housing just to their own members. Again, if they offer it publicly or commercially, now they've got to follow fair housing laws. Another exemption would be an owner occupied property, 1 to 4 units. So I have a duplex. I live on one side, I rent out the other. I'm excluded from fair housing. So if you've got an owner occupied apartment building that's 12 units, that's not exempt because of the number of units. It's only 1 to 4. The other exemption would be a sale where a real estate professional is not included. There's some exemptions there as well. But anytime you've got a licensed professional, which is going to be you, we've got to follow fair housing laws. And then the other big thing, I know I've got advertising for you in here. My advice is make sure you're describing the property, not who's going to live there or how they're going to get there, such as walkability or being close to a church. That indicates you've got to be a member of that church and that religion to live there. Um, and then the other thing I had you add to the notes is you've got 1 year to file a complaint with HUD, Housing and Urban Development. That is who administers the fair housing laws. Now, we've got the multiple listing service on page 78. This is a membership that agents can belong to in order to cooperate with each other and share our data and our available listings with each other. It is not a requirement when you get a license. It's an elected membership. That's what I would want you to know for the exam. I would want you to know puffing versus fraud. Fraud is illegal, but puffing is an exaggeration of the terms. That could be harmful. They're not illegal, but they are definitely annoying. Best house on the block. How do we know it's the best house on the block? Bottom of page 78, I would know these 4 elements for advertising. Internet and email. It's not just limited to these, but these, for sure on internet and email, you need these 4 basics. Your name, full name of your brokerage, city and state where the brokerage is located, and where you hold a license. I am Amy Schaefer Real Estate, West Des Moines, Iowa, licensed in Iowa. I only have a real estate license in this state. Then on page 79, I would know that electronic signatures are allowed because of a federal law. The Uniform Electronic Transaction Act. Again, top of page 79. Then the do not call registry. You are responsible for this as well. I would know 2 numbers, 3 months and 18 months. 3 months after a basic inquiry, 18 months after doing business with someone. That's how long you can contact them. So 3 months and 18 months. 3 months is if they just call and ask the price of a house. 18 months after you actually did business with them. Did I have a question up?